1 second, Earth was celebrating peace. The next, its top envoy was choking on his own blood, live streamed to 9 billion screens, his final words drowned beneath laughter from a lizard-faced ambassador who crushed his skull like a ripe melon. And somewhere in a smoky, half-collapsed dive bar orbiting Neptune, a woman with whiskey in one hand and a gun in the other whispered, "Well, F*** diplomacy, then." The feed was still playing on the cracked hollow wall behind the bar. 1,000 different angles of Dr. Elias Nadir's death. Zoomed-in close-ups, thermal imaging, even a slow-motion shot with some Galactic news station's logo tastefully burned into the corner like it was a sports replay. His execution had been public, theatrical, and cruel. There was no war declaration, no warning, just a sudden and brutal message: Earth did not belong. Earth was beneath them. And now, Earth was broken. Adrian Vale watched the footage without blinking, her face blank, as though she were watching a cooking show. Somewhere in her mind, a door closed and bolted. She didn't feel rage. Not yet. She felt clarity. Pure, razor-edge clarity. They had sent Elias to negotiate peace, and he had gone willingly, full of hope, full of those stupid, idealistic dreams only someone that brilliant and that naive could carry. He hadn't even packed a gun. Just charts. Books. A speech titled, "Bridges to Stars." Now they'd used his death to wipe their boots. A man 2 stools down vomited into his own helmet. Adrian didn't move. The bartender, a cybernetic hunchback with fish for eyes, tried to turn the feed off. She slid her gun across the bar without looking. The screen stayed on. When the emergency council convened back on Earth, they spoke in the language of caution. De-escalation. Probes. Sanctions. Restraint. She could almost hear them in her head. Let's be the better species. We won't lower ourselves to their brutality. Adrian lit a cigarette with a plasma match and exhaled slowly. She knew better. She'd been lower than them. Buried under bodies. Tortured by alien warlords in the black ice mines of Varex 4. Left for dead more times than the sun had risen over Earth's ruined continents. She didn't believe in higher ground. She believed in equal ground. And if they wouldn't give Earth a seat at the table, she'd pull the whole goddamn table into the fire. Her comm buzzed. Not the military one, that was deactivated when she went rogue 3 years ago. This was a different line. One that only lit up if someone important was ready to beg. It was President Rourke. "Adrian," he said. His voice cracked like glass under pressure. "We need you back." She didn't say anything. "You saw what they did." "I did," she said, and finally turned her head to the screen, just in time to catch Elias's skull explode for the 50th time. "Messy. We're activating Thanatos." That got her attention. Project Thanatos was a whisper even in black sites. A ghost op. A kill switch. She'd been its first and last operative. Then they buried it because she scared them more than their enemies. "We need someone to make them bleed." Adrian crushed her cigarette under her boot. "You don't want blood. You want a goddamn funeral pyre." "Yes," he said. No hesitation. She smiled. The ship she stole was called the Ugly Bastard, and it lived up to its name. The hull was scarred from decades of bad decisions. The navigation system spoke with a thick Martian accent and frequently insulted her choice in music. The crew consisted of a washed-up medic addicted to gambling, a mute ex-marine with PTSD-triggered rage seizures, and an AI toaster that had become sentient after being struck by cosmic lightning during a solar flare. They made a hell of a team. As they broke orbit, Adrian reviewed the Galactic Command's chain of power. They were structured like a hydra. Cut one head, 3 more grew back. But they weren't invincible. They were arrogant. Sloppy. And worse, political. That meant secrets. Scandals. Skeletons in vaults. And Adrian was a lockpicker with a very loud key. "Where are we headed first?" asked the medic, chewing on something that looked like beef and tasted like regret. "Helios Prime," she said, strapping herself into the captain's seat. "We start with the circus." Helios Prime was the crown jewel of the Galactic Command. Not their capital, but their showroom. A planet-sized embassy where aliens from 100 systems drank overpriced cocktails and signed treaties that would later be ignored. She'd been there once, undercover, back when she was still wearing dog tags and pretending to care about chain of command. She remembered the smell of ambition. It smelled like polished chrome and fierce sweat. As they landed in the lower levels, among the smugglers, whores, and oxygen thieves, Adrian felt something tighten in her chest. It wasn't emotion. It was restraint. Every fiber of her screamed to shoot first, burn later. But she needed answers. Who ordered Elias's execution? Why? And why hadn't Earth been wiped off the map yet, if war was the point? She posed as a negotiator from a non-aligned system, a small planet with a long name and no real standing. With a fake ID, a hooded cloak, and a pair of boot knives, she blended in well enough. Until she ran into a bounty hunter who recognized her. Adrian Vale? The creature rasped, its voice like knives in soup. You've got a price on your head the size of a moon crater. She smiled politely. You must be mistaking me for someone who isn't about to kick your ass. The fight drew a crowd. She broke the creature's jaw with a bottle of fermented algae, flipped over a table, and disarmed 3 more thugs before security intervened. They weren't there to arrest her, they were there to watch. She slipped away during the chaos, ducking into a back room that doubled as a weapons cache and a karaoke bar. Inside, a slug the size of a water buffalo was singing something that might have been Lady Gaga in binary. Adrian tuned it out. She was already hacking into a terminal. The security footage from the Envoy's death hadn't just been broadcast, it had been edited. Chopped up, filtered, cleaned. But someone had saved the raw feed. And in that raw feed, one frame was different. Elias wasn't begging. He wasn't crying. He was holding up something. A data crystal. And mouthing one word. Home. Her pulse kicked up. She copied the feed, pocketed the drive, and left the bar just as the slug hit the high note and exploded. Apparently it was part of the act. Back on the ship, she replayed the raw footage 10 times. Elias hadn't just been a martyr. He had discovered something. And someone had made damn sure he never said what it was. Adrian stared out the viewport at the infinite black beyond. They thought they killed peace. What they did was wake up something worse. Something they'd buried years ago. Now she was back. And the galaxy had exactly one chance to make peace again, before she started taking heads. The first thing Adrian noticed about Helios Prime was how fake it smelled. The air was filtered through a dozen floral algorithms meant to relax different species, but all it did was make her want to punch something. The gleaming streets, the dancing light displays, the smiling ambassadors in their glittering robes. It was a circus with better PR. If Earth ever wanted to pretend it belonged among the stars, it would have to first survive the endless layers of galactic politics, where everyone smiled with their teeth and stabbed with their pens. She hated this place almost as much as she hated the people who ran it. The ugly bastard had docked in the underbelly of the trade sector, well below the clean white domes the Galactic Command showed off in their recruitment ads. Down here, the laws were looser, the lighting dimmer, and everything cost more than it should. She walked through the crowd with her hood up, weapons hidden but close, and a biometric scrambler sewn into her jacket just in case. The alien crowd didn't bother her. She'd seen worse than 4-eyed giants and jellyfish in trench coats. What bothered her was how many of them looked nervous. Like something big was coming, and no one knew where the first shot would land. She ducked into a back alley bar called The Drift, a place that served drinks strong enough to burn through steel and secrets dark enough to be classified. Her contact was already waiting, sitting in a booth beneath a broken neon sign. He was a Sarnathi smuggler with 6 arms, a twitchy eye, and a habit of talking too fast. She didn't trust him, which made him perfect. "Reaper," he hissed as she slid into the seat across from him. "You know, there's a whole lot of credits on your head right now. And you're still breathing because you haven't tried to collect it," she said, ordering a drink with a flick of her fingers. "What did you find?" He pulled out a data shard from one of his many sleeves and slid it across the table. You were right. The execution? It wasn't sanctioned by the full council. It was orchestrated by a splinter group. Red Feather. They've got influence, resources, ships. And they've been recruiting. Adrian tapped the shard against her knuckle, thinking. Red Feather wasn't just a fringe cult anymore. They were organized. Dangerous. And stupid enough to think killing Earth's envoy would go unnoticed. Or maybe not. Maybe that was the point. Maybe they wanted chaos. Nothing shook up the galaxy quite like a war. Who's backing them? She asked. That's the fun part, he said, grinning nervously. They're being financed through a dozen shell core. But 3 of those trace back to Earth. Your Earth. The words hit her like a gut punch, even though she saw it coming. She pocketed the shard and stood up. Wait, the smuggler stammered. Aren't you going to? Nope, she said, and walked out before he could finish. She wasn't in the mood for gratitude. Or guilt. Back on the ship, she plugged the shard into the NAV system. Crumb, the AI toaster, immediately complained. This thing is riddled with illegal code and digital breadcrumbs, it said, voice full of righteous indignation. You know what happens when you bring malware onto a sentient ship? Let me guess, Adrian muttered, strapping herself into the pilot's seat. We all die horribly. No, Crumb replied. I get infected and start writing poetry. Worse, the medic chimed in from the galley, chewing something synthetic. We've seen your poetry. Adrian ignored them both. The data pointed to a small diplomatic relay station just outside regulated space. Officially, it was neutral territory. Unofficially, it was where bribes went to take naps and spies went to disappear. If Red Feather had sent orders, recruited mechs, or erased evidence, it likely passed through there. They arrived 12 hours later. The station looked like a rusted gear wheel spinning in space, surrounded by mines disguised as asteroids. Adrian took the stealth route, docking through a maintenance shaft and slipping inside before any alarms could go off. She left the crew behind. This part was personal. The relay was mostly abandoned, manned by a handful of skeleton staff too bored or too high to notice an assassin walking through their hallways. She hacked into the central archive using a retinal spoof and voice clone of a dead diplomat whose jaw she'd broken last year. The files were exactly where she expected, heavily encrypted, full of gaps, but just enough to see a pattern. Orders to execute the envoy came weeks before his arrival. Not from Galactic Command, but from a flagged private network. It had Earth clearance codes. High level. Presidential level. Elias Nadir had been sent into a death trap by someone back home. Adrian downloaded everything and set the archive to auto-wipe. She was about to leave when she heard something behind her. A quiet breath. A click of a weapon. She spun and threw a blade just as the attacker lunged. The blade hit an armor plate, but it was enough to stagger them. They were fast, well-trained, and wearing Red Feather insignia under a diplomatic uniform. They fought in silence, no words, no threats. Just fists, steel, and fury. Adrian took a hit to the ribs, then snapped the assassin's arm at the elbow and slammed their head into a console hard enough to dent it. She stood over the body, panting, bruised, and smiling. The galaxy kept underestimating her. That was their mistake. Back on the ship, the crew watched as she uploaded the files to a secure line. So what's the plan? The ex-Marine asked, his voice gravel. Adrian sat down and opened a new file. It was labeled Glass Halo. We go deeper, she said. Red Feather isn't just some cult. They're trying to light the whole damn galaxy on fire. And Earth's helping them do it. Crumb whirred nervously. And if it's true? If Earth's government really betrayed us? Then I burn them too, she said. No exceptions. They went dark for a while, running silent. Adrian stared out the viewport, thinking about Elias. About how he used to argue with her about hope, about unity, about believing in the better nature of civilizations. He believed peace was possible. She believed peace was a lie people told themselves until the next war. Maybe now they were both right. And maybe it was time someone reminded the stars what it cost to kill a good man. The planet Vor's Reach was the kind of place where wars went to drink. Half jungle, half scrap heap, it was a forgotten world ruled not by governments or treaties, but by whoever had the most guns and the least regard for consequences. The storms never stopped, the gravity shifted without warning, and the sky flickered with lightning like it was angry at being born. Adrian had always said if the galaxy had an armpit, this was the sweat-stained sleeve above it, which made it the perfect place to find Vex Kale. She hadn't seen him in 5 years. Not since he'd left her bleeding on a cold floor during an op gone wrong, muttering something about survival and debts and how love didn't pay for medpacks. Now he ran an arms cartel the size of a small moon, operated out of a fortress built into the remains of a crashed dreadnought, and was rumored to be both rich and completely insane. She doubted the last part. Vex wasn't crazy. He was calculated. Every move, every word, every betrayal had been part of a bigger plan. It was just that most of the time, Adrian couldn't tell if the plan was revenge, redemption, or a really elaborate joke on the universe. She walked into his compound like she owned the place. The guards raised their weapons. She raised her middle finger. The system still recognized her biometric signature. Of course it did. He wouldn't erase her. Not Vex. He was sentimental in the worst ways. Inside, everything looked the same. Stark metal, weapons on display like art, and music that sounded like someone punching a synthesizer. She found him in the central chamber, lounging across a throne made from the spine of a star beast. He was drinking something green and smoking something that glowed. Well, he said, not rising. If it isn't the universe's angriest ex. Don't flatter yourself, she said, stepping closer. I'm here for intel. You always were romantic, he said with that same damn smirk she used to punch off his face when he was being particularly smug. Come to kill me, kiss me, or recruit me? Maybe all three, she said. Depends how useful you are. He studied her for a moment. The tension was there, thick and charged, like a power cell about to explode. Then he laughed. You heard about Red Feather, he said. I know they're connected to Elias's death, she replied. And I know they're growing faster than anyone predicted. You're selling to them. I sell to everyone, he said. That's the beauty of neutrality. It pays well. She stepped closer until they were almost nose to nose. They're planning something big. Operation Glass Halo. You're going to tell me what it is. He didn't blink. Didn't move. Just smiled wider. I might. Adrian sighed. What do you want, Vex? Same thing I always wanted, he said, voice softer. A front row seat when the galaxy finally burns. She wanted to hit him. Instead, she said nothing and waited. Finally, he nodded toward a terminal. There's a secure vault on Drovos. Dead planet, no atmosphere, full of secrets. I intercepted a transmission last week. Someone from Red Feather tried to erase a file from the vault. They failed. Whatever it is, it's locked under enough encryption to make an AI cry. Adrian turned to leave. One condition, Vex said. She paused. I come with you. She glanced back. You want in on this mess? I built half the mess, he said. Might as well see how it ends. Drovos was as dead as advertised. A frozen rock spinning slowly in the void, stripped bare by mining centuries ago and forgotten by all but the most desperate. Adrian and Vex landed on the dark side, cloaked and silent, slipping through the ice canyons until they reached the vault. It was buried under layers of ice and reinforced metal, sealed with biometric keys and ancient tech no one used anymore. She sliced through it like butter. Inside, the air was stale and cold, the lights flickering to life one by one. Rows of cryo-containers and data cubes stretched into the dark. Whatever this place had been, it wasn't just a vault. It was a graveyard of forgotten truths. They found the terminal in the back. Vex worked the code while Adrian stood watch, pulse rifle in hand. It's not just Glass Halo, he said after a while. It's bigger. How big? Galactic Command knows, he said. Or at least some of them. This isn't a coup. It's a cleanup. Adrian leaned over. The file loaded slowly, layers of security peeling back. What emerged wasn't just strategy. It was a timeline. A plan. Earth had been targeted long before the Envoy was sent. The Envoy had uncovered something: records of hidden treaties, experiments on human prisoners, agreements made without public knowledge. Elias hadn't died because he was a threat to peace. He died because he found out peace was never real. Adrian felt her throat tighten. He'd gone up there thinking he could change things, believing in justice. And the whole time, he was a walking secret they needed erased. Suddenly, Crumb's voice crackled over comms. You have incoming. Multiple signatures. Red Feather. They had been followed. The vault door blew inward. Gunfire erupted. Adrian rolled behind a column and returned fire, picking off 2 soldiers before they hit the floor. Vex moved like a ghost, fast and lethal, cutting through their flank with precision. But there were too many. Red Feather had sent a kill team. We need an exit! Adrian shouted. I have one, Crumb replied. But it involves explosives and very bad timing. Story of my life, she muttered, grabbing the drive and running toward the back tunnels. They escaped through a half-collapsed mining shaft, collapsing the entrance behind them with a plasma charge. By the time they reached the ship, Adrian was bleeding from her shoulder, and Vex was grinning like a lunatic. You missed this, didn't you? He said, panting. She glared at him. I miss a lot of things. Bullet wounds aren't one of them. Back on the ship, she watched the decrypted files over and over. There were names. Dates. Proof. Operation Glass Halo was the Galactic Command's plan to incite war across the systems, using Earth as a scapegoat. Red Feather was just a match. The real fire was systemic. And somewhere in that list of names was Earth's president. Rourke hadn't sent Elias to negotiate. He'd sent him to die. Adrian sat in silence for a long time. Then she turned to Vex. We're not just going after Red Feather anymore. Good, he said, wiping blood from his cheek. Bigger targets make better headlines. She uploaded the files to a dead drop for allies to intercept, knowing it would make her a target everywhere. But it didn't matter. The truth was out now. And if the galaxy wanted war, then she would make damn sure they knew who lit the match, and who came to collect. The Reaper had a new mission. Not just revenge. Reckoning. The space around Station K shimmered with the light of 20 different suns, but none of that glow touched the shadows inside the compound. Suspended in a Lagrange orbit between 2 gas giants, the station was officially classified as a diplomatic communications array. Unofficially, it was a fortress housing one of the most secure intel grids in the galaxy, along with a collection of secrets that could collapse entire governments if aired. Galactic Command had chosen Station K as their private archive vault, where dirty truths went to sleep, guarded by enforcers who didn't ask questions and never missed a shot. It was suicide to even approach without clearance. So naturally, Adrian Vale went straight in the front door. She wore a stolen officer's uniform, her hair twisted up in regulation coils, her expression pulled tight with just the right balance of superiority and boredom. Beside her, Vex strolled in like he owned the place, wearing an expensive cloak made from the hide of something that had probably eaten a few diplomats before dying. Behind them, a briefcase containing a hyper-compressed explosives rig disguised as a diplomatic server chip ticked softly. The guards scanned them, blinked, and waved them through. No one questioned the uniform. No one questioned the name she used either, Admiral Jules Cern of the Lothari Defense Pact, freshly reinstated after a suspicious shuttle crash. They moved quickly once inside, bypassing biometric checkpoints using a sequence Crumb had acquired by blackmailing a sentient Vault AI 2 weeks ago. Every corridor was sterilized, lined in chrome, the kind of place where people vanished and were never spoken of again. Adrian kept her steps even, her nerves tucked deep. She had one shot at this. Steal the raw source files detailing Operation Glass Halo's origins, leak them to every news node in the galaxy, and turn the command's secrets into a wildfire no one could contain. If she failed, it wouldn't just be her life on the line. Earth would be framed for the largest military provocation in intergalactic history, and the war they'd started with Elias's death would finally ignite for real. They reached the central vault without alarms. Vex hacked the primary node while Adrian watched the hallway through a compact drone screen, her fingers twitching near the grip of her pistol. There was something wrong. No movement. No chatter. Too easy. She was about to voice it when Vex said, "Got it." The vault opened. Inside, a single server unit pulsed with an ominous red glow. Adrian stepped in, hands steady, and inserted the spike drive. The system resisted, of course. Nothing this dangerous came without a fight, but Crumb's virus slipped past the encryption like oil on glass. Within seconds, the screen filled with files. Not just the strategy documents for Glass Halo, but orders of assassination, lists of paid-off diplomats, covert supply routes, Earth-based sleeper agents, even falsified data about the Envoy's death meant to convince neutral systems that Elias had tried to smuggle a weapon into the summit. Adrian copied everything. And then alarms howled to life. She spun, gun out, just in time to see a shock trooper slam into Vex, driving him through a wall. Another descended on her, armored head to toe, weapon humming with energy. She ducked, fired 3 times, hit once. The thing staggered but didn't fall. These weren't mercenaries. These were cybernetic enforcers, half machine, half mad, built for one thing: erasure. She ran, dragging Vex behind her as explosions rocked the corridor. He coughed blood and swore, barely staying on his feet, but the grin never left his face. They fought their way out room by room, luring the enforcers into crossfire, triggering internal defenses, using the station's own paranoia against itself. At one point, Adrian detonated a coolant line that froze 2 attackers solid mid-sprint, their bodies shattering like glass under her boot. By the time they reached the docking bay, half the station was on fire. Crumb had overridden the defense turrets, and launched 3 diversion pods to confuse sensors. Adrian and Vex sprinted across the bay, bullets and plasma bolts tearing through the air around them. She didn't look back. Looking back was how you got dead. They launched just as the vault behind them exploded. In orbit, the station burned silently, chunks peeling off into space as emergency shutters closed across its spinning arms. Adrian watched from the bridge, covered in blood, half of it hers, and let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Then she uploaded the files. Within minutes, the truth was everywhere. Every system, every species, every backwater bar with a cracked holoscreen lit up with the same message: proof that Galactic Command had planned to use Earth as a trigger. Proof that the Envoy was a martyr, not a criminal. That Earth's leaders had been complicit. That war was a design, not a reaction. Riots broke out in neutral zones. Civil uprisings on command-controlled planets. Whole governments withdrew support, denouncing the very body they had once worshipped. The cracks Adrian had been hunting for were real, and now they were fractures. Deep ones? She didn't celebrate. Instead, she opened the final folder. Presidential Authorization Codes. Dated 2 weeks before Elias's mission. Signed by President Rourke. It was all there in perfect clarity. The orders to send Elias with falsified documents. To allow Red Feather access to human diplomatic codes. To keep Adrienne's Black Ops clearance active, just in case the cover-up needed cleaning. She felt the rage bubble, sharp and thick in her chest. He hadn't just betrayed Elias. He had set her up from the beginning. Brought her out of retirement not to avenge Elias, but to bury the bodies piling up from a conspiracy he helped build. She had always known corruption ran deep. She hadn't known it wore her flag. Crumb called her to the bridge. A broadcast request. Direct line. From Earth. She answered. Rourke's face filled the screen. Tired. Cold. Calculated. "You've done damage, Adrian," he said. "No, I exposed it," she replied. "You did the damage. There are still enemies out there. Red Feather's not gone." "No," she said. "But I'm coming for them next." He exhaled. You're off mission. There was no mission, she snapped. Just a lie wrapped in patriotism. I could have you executed. You tried that once. Didn't take. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Rourke's image cut. Vex limped in, clutching his side. So, what now? He asked. Adrian looked out at the chaos rippling across the stars. Now we finish what Elias started, she said. We take down the rest. Red Feather. The command? Anyone who thinks truth can be silenced with a bullet. Vex raised an eyebrow. Even if it means going after Earth? She didn't answer right away. Eventually, she said. Especially if it means that. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. And if the galaxy had no space for justice, then she'd carve one herself. With fire. With blood. With every truth they tried to bury. She had the files. She had the names. And she still had one bullet left. They didn't sleep. No one did, not after what they had just done. The ugly bastard floated in deep drift, hidden in the static of a decaying nebula that scrambled long-range scans. The hull still trembled from the near-miss escape, and the faint smell of scorched carbon hung in the air. Adrian stood at the viewport, watching fragments of Station K drift through space like glitter from a bomb. One by one, planets across the galaxy lit up with riots, protests, and civil unrest as the truth spread like a fire no one could contain. Governments distanced themselves. Systems broke treaties. Entire planetary blocks pulled out of the Galactic Command in furious waves. And yet, even with chaos blooming like blood and water, Adrian knew this wasn't the end. This was the midpoint. The part of the story where the villains lose control, and someone worse rises from the ashes. The files they had pulled from Station K were still decrypting. Crumb had connected to a dozen blacklisted satellites, and was running a burn-through protocol that would unlock everything within the next few hours. But Adrian had already seen enough to know what she had to do. Red Feather wasn't just some rogue faction anymore. They had woven themselves into the command skeleton. Deep. Patient. Generational. Their vision of the galaxy wasn't one of order or unity or peace. It was purity through destruction. Controlled conflict. A galaxy stripped of free will and replaced with obedience. She poured a glass of something illegal and didn't drink it. Her hands were too steady to shake, but her thoughts moved fast, sharp, and loud. Elias had believed in systems. Believed that change could be negotiated, that truth had weight and integrity. Adrian had once believed in that too. Then she started counting the dead. She learned fast that the galaxy didn't listen to ideas, it listened to power. And sometimes power wore a uniform, but more often, it wore a grin and carried a knife. Behind her, Vex paced with a limp, nursing 3 cracked ribs and a bruised ego. He hadn't spoken much since they left Station K, which was unusual. Vex could monologue his way through a minefield if given the chance. But this silence was different. He had seen something down in that vault that even his usual bravado couldn't laugh off. Adrian didn't press. Some truths worked best when they simmered. When the final folder cracked open, Crumb didn't announce it. The screen simply lit up with a single word. Helios. Adrian frowned. Helios Prime? No, Crumb said, its voice lower than usual. Helios Core. It's not a planet. It's a station. Hidden. Deep black. Not on any star maps. Adrian moved closer. The files poured in, images, ship manifests, encryption logs, genetic files, AI experiment reports. Every file pointed to the same thing, a secret project underneath Red Feather's operations, something even Galactic Command had only partial knowledge of. Operation Glass Halo was just the visible tip of a much deeper, older plan. Helios Core was real. And it was designed for one thing: initiation. In the past 2 decades, Red Feather had been kidnapping political dissidents, scientists, failed operatives, and even civilians across hundreds of systems. They weren't killing them. They were repurposing them. Genetic modification, cybernetic reconditioning, personality wipes. They were creating soldiers. Not clones. Not droids. People. Rewritten from the ground up. Loyal. Programmable. Disposable. A ghost army made from the forgotten and discarded. Adrian stared at a photo pulled from the files. The subject had no name. Just a face. And it was hers. The room went quiet. "I didn't authorize any deep scans," she said slowly. "You didn't need to," Crumb replied. "These were taken 5 years ago. During your mission on Nema 4. Before you went dark." Vex moved closer and saw it too. Adrian bound, her neural skin highlighted on the screen. She wasn't just targeted by Red Feather. She had been inside Helios' core. They had tested something on her. Something she didn't remember. Her mouth went dry. For a moment, she felt the floor shift. Not physically, mentally. Like her own history had blinked and changed behind her back. They had taken her, used her, and wiped her clean. Her memory gaps, the strange dreams, the flickers of violence she couldn't explain, they weren't just scars from war. They were pieces of someone else's script. Someone who thought she'd stay asleep. "Why would they let me live?" she said, more to herself than anyone. "They didn't," Vex said quietly. "You broke out." Adrian turned. "How do you know?" "Because I was there," he said. "Helios core. That's where I saw you last. You don't remember, but you weren't just escaping. You were tearing the place apart." Adrian tried to speak, but the words stuck. This wasn't betrayal. This was something else. Something colder. She had been altered. Maybe rebuilt. And the worst part wasn't that she didn't know what they changed. It was that she couldn't be sure what they left alone. She looked down at the image again. Her face, but wrong. Just slightly. Like a mask of herself worn too tightly. "I need to go back," she said. Vex's eyes widened. "Adrian, no. You go near that place and they'll kill you before you step off the ramp." "Let them try," she said. "I want to know what they did. I want to know who I was before they rewrote me. And I want to finish what I started." Vex didn't argue. He knew that tone. It was the tone she'd used when she swore revenge on the warlord who had buried a dozen prisoners alive. The tone she used when she promised to bring down an entire weapons cartel single-handedly. The tone she used when she made peace with the idea of dying, as long as she could take everyone responsible with her. They plotted a course for the coordinates buried in the last folder. Helios core had no official location, but the encryption leak had exposed a backdoor route, one used for covert supply ships. It would take them through uncharted territory, close to the edge of a dying star, past radiation fields and military graveyards. No reinforcements. No allies. Just ghosts. As the stars shifted and the ship entered silent run mode, Adrian sat alone in her quarters, turning the old photo over in her hands. The version of her that looked back was strange, eyes too calm, face too blank. She had always known she was a weapon. But now she realized she might also be a test. A prototype. And if Red Feather had perfected their process, there might be others. More Reapers. More soldiers like her, built in her image, twisted in the name of order. She didn't know what she would find at Helios core. But she knew one thing for certain. Whatever version of herself they thought they'd created, they hadn't finished the job. She had. And this time, she was going back not to remember, but to burn it all down.